Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
And I'm Leah.
It's our history unit for the month of February. We kick off the month of February with a unit on history. And maybe you've noticed around Taipei, I'm not sure about other cities in Taiwan, but here in Taipei, there used to be these little yellow tiles on the sidewalks that are there to help blind people get around. And I don't do much walking anymore. I take the MRT and ride my bicycle mostly, so I don't remember the last time I saw them. I assume they're still around and that there are still blind people trying to get around, so hopefully they are helpful for them. But we're going to find out exactly where those yellow tiles came from, where they were invented. So let's find that out today. Let's dive into our lesson about Tenji blocks, how the invention of one man has helped millions. Let's listen.
In Japan, tactile paving blocks are used to help the blind. One type shows potential dangers, and another helps indicate which way to travel. The blocks are yellow, so those with low vision can see them more easily. The idea for the tiles comes from Miyake Seiichi. He saw a man with a cane nearly get hit by a car. Braille, the writing system for the blind, gave him inspiration to try something similar for the street. He thought that putting various patterns on the ground might help the visually impaired. They could feel the pavement with their feet or a cane. Miyake financed several versions of his blocks before he settled on a final design. He decided to use standard cement to build them. This material made the blocks easy to both build and use. He named them Tenji blocks, after the Japanese word for Braille. In 1970, a Tenji block was placed at the platform of Abikocho Station in Osaka. This prompted other stations to do the same. In Tokyo, the city government budgeted for 10,000 blocks in Tagada-no-Baba, where many facilities for visually impaired people were located. It became the first model district for traffic safety in the country. Today, Tenji blocks can be found all over the globe. They are even legally required in some areas.
Okay, everybody, let's get to it. Let's explain the contents of today's lesson. The title here is Tenji blocks, how the invention of one man has helped millions. So we're going to tell you how this man's invention has helped millions of people. And his invention is the Tenji blocks. Tenji is Japanese for dianzi, or Braille, as we say in Western countries. Now, here in the first paragraph, it says, in Japan, tactile paving blocks are used to help the blind. Now, tactile or tactile, that just means having to do with touch. And these are paving blocks that are in the pavement or the sidewalk.
Right. And if somebody is a tactile or a tactile learner, it means that they learn by touching things. Some people learn by auditory stimulus. They learn by what they hear. Some people are visual learners, so they learn by what they see. And some people are tactile learners, so they learn by touching things, which is what you would have to do, for example, in this situation, because you need to know what these paving blocks are trying to tell you. These tactile paving blocks are used to help the blind. Blindness is a handicap or an impairment that some people have where they can't see. Now, there are different degrees of blindness, but if you're fully blind, a lot of times you might see just a little bit of shadow or lightness, and that's about it. It's not like what we would see necessarily when we close our eyes, but if you're not blind, what you would see if you close your eyes, but it might be pretty close to that. One type of tactile paving block shows potential dangers, so shows possible dangers. Potential means possible dangers. So that might be like stairs, or it might be a road that is suddenly coming up, or a big drop in levels. And another type of block helps indicate which way to travel.
Right, so that's the second type of tenji block. One is this way, another is another way. So yes, indeed, we've got one type which shows you potential dangers that might come up to you or they might happen to you. You might come across them. And another type will tell you which way to travel, which way is right, which way is left, which way is forward, etc., etc. Now, the blocks are yellow, so those with low vision can see them more easily. So we're not talking about people who are totally blind. They should help those people out, yes, indeed. But if you have low vision, if you can only see colors and things like that, but maybe you can't make out shapes and sizes and things like that, the yellow color should be visible to you.
That's right, and that's why yellow is used and also red. And just to mention, I noticed I was really interested in what these tenji blocks were saying because, again, Braille is a language. So Braille, when you read these raised dots, it is teaching you something. You're reading something. So I was wondering what the tiles are saying. And I found that if you have 6 dots and 6 rows, then they're kind of these bumps on the tile. Then that tells you there's a road crossing or you have a level offset. Another one is if you have the blisters, the little bumps. If you have one row and then the second row is what's called offset, which means they're not all in straight lines. They're kind of off to another side. And so you have one row that's one line and another row that's at a different angle, at a different line. Those little dots show that there's a train platform or a level change. You also get tiles with stripes to tell you that there are stairs or there's danger ahead. And you get a combination of lines that go lengthwise or go across if you have, like, for example, 2 different pathways, a bicycle way and a pedestrian way. And then the pedestrian way will be across, so kind of like blocking you, and if you were looking at it, and the bikeway will have lines that will go straight, so along the path. That's a lot of information.
It is, and most of us probably don't need that information, but blind people definitely need to know that stuff, so it's a good thing for us to know that's what they go through when they're trying to get around a city. But where does this idea come from? Who invented this? Well, the idea for the tiles comes from Miyake Seiichi. Okay, that's a person in Japan here, and again, we're calling these things tiles. If you look at the sidewalk or the sides of buildings sometimes, you can see these tiles that are there as part of the construction. So I guess here in Taipei, most of the sidewalks have tiles in them. Some don't, I guess. Some are maybe just plain concrete, but a lot of the sidewalks are tiles. And so these are yellow tiles, and the idea for those tiles comes from this guy from Japan, Miyake Seiichi. Sorry, I don't know the kanji for that name.
And he did have a motivation for it. He saw a man with a cane, so a man who was visually impaired, nearly get hit by a car. He saw that happen. He's like, oh, this is terrible. If the man only knew there was danger there. So what he did was he looked at Braille, which is a writing system using raised bumps that is used by visually impaired people or blind people, depending. And you will often see it on keyboards or in elevators. And he used this writing system for the blind, and it gave him inspiration. It gave him a great idea to create, to try something similar for the street. Now, Braille, the name Braille comes from Louis Braille, and he was a Frenchman who was blinded as a teenager in the 1800s. And he wanted to figure out a way to keep reading, and so he created this raised bump system.
Exactly. So that's Braille here. And of course, we've got the term in Japanese and in Chinese. Of course, in Japanese, we're calling it tenji blocks. And so, yes, indeed, this happened because Miyake Seiichi said, hey, I don't want to see blind people get hit by cars. So he developed this system based on Braille, and he knew about that system, so it gave him inspiration to try something similar for the street. So here we've got the word inspiration. It comes from the verb to to inspire, which means it gives you some kind of idea when you see it. If you travel to Europe, for example, and you look at some great scenery there, you might be inspired to move there, or you might have the inspiration to move there, or you might get some inspiration for creating art or studying music or learning a language or something like that. So, of course, when he had this incident, or when he saw this incident, he was inspired to try something similar for the street using Braille.
Right, and actually you can also call somebody an inspiration. You're an inspiration if they tell you something really smart, or if they're dressed beautifully and you're like, oh my goodness, you're an inspiration. You're just so beautiful.
Isn't that a song by Chicago, You're My Inspiration, or something like that?
Yes, it is.
Can't think of that right now. It's an old song, but yeah, you're my inspiration. You inspire me. So yes, he was inspired to try to use Braille in the street.
He thought that putting various patterns on the ground might help the visually impaired. So he thought that these different tiles with the patterns on them might help people who are walking by with a cane to feel that the road is different in this spot, or the sidewalk is different in this spot, and they can watch out for possible dangers ahead. And the people that he was trying to help, well, they were the visually impaired. Visually is referring to something that you see. So if you are visually attracted to someone, it means you're attracted to someone because of the way that they look to you. And visually impaired means that you are having problems or impairment with your visual field. So you're not able to see like a person who has no impairment would see. So you got, the regular fella who doesn't have an impairment, and a fella who has an impairment who has some problems being able to see.
Right, and if you have trouble hearing, you would be the hearing impaired. And in this particular case, though, these various patterns on the ground might help the visually impaired, and again, they could feel the pavement with their feet or with a cane. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our lesson for today. Let's take a break right now and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是2月份 Unit1-1 Blogs How the Invention of One Man Has Helped Millions。这是一篇克漏字选择的练习题，内容和导盲砖有关，介绍导盲砖的发明人、发明年代以及命名由来。好，我们现在一起来看看学习重点。我们先看到第一题，前文提到有一种类型显示潜在危险，而另有一种有助于指示行进方向。而第一题提到这些砖是黄色的，所以视力不好的空格可以比较容易看得到。根据前后文意，我们知道空格应该填入的是视力不好的人，所以第一题选指示代名词 A those， 那也可以用 people who 来代替。接着请看到第二段这里第二段一开头就让我们知道设置导盲砖的想法是三宅精一先生所提出的。他看过拄着手杖的行人差一点被车子撞到。第二题前一句提到盲人书写系统 Braille 给了他灵感，在街道上尝试空格。我们看一下题目的4个选项。A. Nothing particular. B. Anything identical. C. Something similar. D. Everything mechanical. 从前文推知答案选 C. Something similar 表示 Braille 让三宅精一先生灵机一动，把类似的东西拿到街道上试验。
We're going to take a short break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
All right, everybody, we're back now, and we're going to continue on looking at our story. Miyake financed several versions of his blocks before he settled on a final design. So he paid for, he found money for, maybe he asked other people to help him, give him money, but he financed, he paid for those different versions of his blocks until he settled on one. He settled on a final design. If you settle on something, you just go, okay, now I have decided which one of all these 12 I really like, and I'm going to stick to it. You stay with that particular one.
Right, and notice here we do have the word finance here. Some dictionaries will tell you that the verb form should be pronounced financed, but most Americans, at least, will say finance as both the noun and the verb. He basically came up with the money for several versions of his blocks, and then he settled on or decided on this final design. That's the one he liked, and he decided to use standard cement to build them. I guess you can build those tiles in different ways. You can, fire them in a kiln or something like that, but he decided to use standard cement, which is used in construction, cement or concrete. He used this standard cement to build them. Usually cement is like the glue, and then you have cement. And what else do you have? You have rocks and water and stuff like that, and you mix them together, and then you get concrete.
Right, and that's one kind of tile that you can have. Like you said, you could also have ceramic tiles like you might have in your kitchen or your bathroom. But cement tiles would be really good for an area that has a lot of footpath, like a lot of foot use. So if you have a lot of pedestrians, a lot of people walking on those sidewalks, then it's really good to have something that's really sturdy, and cement is sturdy. So it says this material made the blocks easy to both build and use. It's a cheap material. You can build it and use it easily. He named them tenji blocks, and that was after the Japanese word for braille. Now, we mentioned that earlier. So in 1970, a tenji block was placed at the platform of the Abikocho station in Osaka. So that is a train station, I believe, or a metro station. And they placed one of these blocks there. Probably the first time this block was placed there, everybody's like, well, that's a weird thing. I wonder what that is. And if you think about it, for folks who don't use the blocks, they don't have vision impairment, we probably don't think about that very much every day. But for folks who are visually impaired, they might find these blocks super useful for many different reasons.
Exactly. So, yes, they were first placed at this station in Osaka, Japan, way back in 1970, and this prompted other stations, or it inspired them to do the same. Now, in Tokyo, the city government budgeted for 10,000 blocks in Takadanobaba, hope I said that right, where many facilities for visually impaired people were located. Okay, so we've got Tokyo getting in on the act. Of course, as you know, Osaka and Tokyo are different cities. So this started in Osaka, and then Tokyo got word of this idea, and they thought, hey, that sounds like a good idea. We've got lots of blind people here in Tokyo, so let's get some of those blocks ourselves here. So the government of Tokyo, the city government, budgeted for 10,000 blocks in this place in Tokyo. Now, here we've got budget as a verb, okay? That means they set aside this money in the budget for 10,000 blocks, okay? They probably consulted some people and asked them, hey, how much is it going to cost to manufacture 10,000 blocks? Well, they got a figure, and then they had some meetings and stuff like that, and they came up with an amount of money to afford these blocks, to purchase these blocks, or at least have them manufactured.
Right, and the reason why they wanted to put them in Takadanobaba, we think that's probably how it said, it was that there are many facilities, many businesses or many buildings where visually impaired people are located. So that might mean that there's a school for the visually impaired, or there might be an area where people are taking job training classes that are visually impaired. And those would be different facilities that might be, benefited by having these blocks on the ground. And I would imagine it must be pretty amazing once these 10,000 blocks are laid out in that area for people who are visually impaired, or at the time, I guess, were visually impaired. So people who are visually impaired to move around on the sidewalks and actually see that this works very, very well. So I would think that helped Tokyo, this area, to become the first model district for traffic safety in the country. Here we have the model district. A model district is one where, it's setting an example for all the other districts. So this district in Tokyo is the model district.
Exactly. So this, of course, is located in Tokyo. Takadanobaba. I hope I said that right. I think the kanji for that is Gaotianmachang, if you're familiar with that place in Tokyo. And, of course, that's where they set up these blocks in Tokyo because, as we've stated here, it was a model for traffic safety. Model district for traffic safety. And, of course, like Taiwan here, Japan has its districts as well. I'm not sure if they were using ding there, though, like Seaman Ding here, because that's pronounced cho in Japanese. But, they have these political divisions in cities and in prefectures and stuff like that. So this is a district in Tokyo, a neighborhood in Tokyo, and that's where they tried these tiles out. Again, the Tenji blocks.
You can also have a voting district, which would be an area where people live, where they will go and vote at one specific location. That might be one voting district. So today, well, actually, going back to finishing up again a comment on this sentence, this setting out of these 10,000 blocks really helped traffic safety in that particular area. And that's why they became the first model district for traffic safety. So once they set these blocks out, people weren't accidentally getting hit by cars. People were aware of the dangers that were out there on the road. And it meant that the situation was a lot safer. There were fewer accidents and there were fewer, car-to-car accidents, and maybe not so much there, but pedestrian car or pedestrian motorcycle accidents. And today, so now, Tenji blocks can be found all over the globe. I like the way how we were in 1970 at the beginning of the paragraph, and with one word, we came forward 51, 52 years, right? So we're now in 2022, and at the beginning of the paragraph, we started in 1970. With one word, today, we're back in 2022. Today, Tenji blocks can be found all over the globe.
And globe here just refers to the world, so they can be found all over the world, all over the globe. And as we said before in the lesson, I believe they are quite common here in Taiwan. And come to think of it, I think there are such things in the MRT system to help blind people get around when they're taking the trains. So that's good there. And also, I should compliment the MRT system here in Taipei because it seems like every time there's a blind person taking the train, there's someone waiting for them at their destination station. So I believe the blind are taken well care of here in Taipei. And the Tenji blocks are also probably doing their part as well.
There are other things that also can be out there that help folks who are visually impaired. One example might be seeing eye dogs. I've always thought it would be really fascinating to take care of a seeing eye dog when it's a puppy. There's actually a volunteer service here in Taiwan where you can take care of a young golden retriever, which is a dog that is often used as a seeing eye dog because it's quite a patient dog and a very sweet temperamented dog and very smart. You can take care of them as they're younger, and someone will come and take the dog out for a walk and will train them on how to perform as a seeing eye dog. And I've always thought that would be a really cool thing to volunteer for, to take care of one of these puppies.
Sure, they're lovable puppies indeed. And again, we have the Tenji blocks to help blind people navigate the city. I think I've even heard some traffic crossings that have sounds beeping to let blind people know how long the light is going to stay green so they can sort of determine how much time they have in order to cross the street. Okay, that brings us to the end of our explanation for today. Let's turn things over now to our Chinese teacher.
我们从文章前两段得知，导盲砖的发明人三宅精一先生从盲人点字系统 Braille 得到灵感，而这一段则进一步说明后续研发的过程。现在请同学看到第3题 Miyake financed several 空格 of his blocks before he settled on a final design。 中文的意思是说，三宅先生对好几个空格的地砖投入研发经费，之后才选定一项设计案。请同学看一下选项 A. Negotiations 表示协商谈判， B. Sessions 那就是一段一段的时间， C. Observations 是观察的意思， D. Versions 是版本。我们知道设计方案通常都会有好几个版本， 最后执行的时候必须选定其中一个版本，所以第3题答案选 D。 接下来请同学看第4题。 In 1970, a Tenji block was placed at the platform of Abicocho Station in Osaka. 好，后面的这一题 This 是我们第4题的题干所在。前一句说到在1970年在大阪我孙子町站的月台上铺设了一块 Tenji 砖块，这空格其他车站也这么做。请看选项 A prompted 是促使的意思， B withdrew 退出撤回， C demanded 要求， D forbade 是禁止。我们从文意判断，第4题答案选择 A prompted， 这促使了其他车站也这么做。紧接着请同学看到第5题。 In Tokyo, the city government budgeted for 10,000 blocks in Takadano Baba. 好，空格 Many facilities for visually impaired people were located. 中文的意思是说，在东京市政府编列预算，在高田马场町铺设10000块地砖，空格有很多视障辅助设施都设置在那里。空格前 The city government budgeted for 10,000 blocks in Takadano Baba 句子已经完整了，有主词 the city government， 动词 budgeted， 而逗点后又有一个子句，主词是 many facilities for visually impaired people， 动词是 were located。 要不就是选择一个连接词连接2个子句，要不就是选择关系词，让后者成为关系子句，补充说明前面的高田马场町。我们从文意判断，应该是高田马场町是很多视障辅助设施的所在，所以第5题选择 D where 关系副词。以上就是我们针对这篇扣漏字的解题所做的说明，谢谢。
All right, everybody, that's all the time we have for today. If you're feeling like you want to see if you can figure out what the Braille Tenji blocks mean, you should try walking down the street and running your toes over it as you go. See if you can figure out what maybe it's trying to warn you of or let you know is up ahead. For English Digest, I'm Leah.
And I'm Tom. Goodbye.
Bye.